On a warm Saturday afternoon, May 18, 1889, in the Sicilian town of Rossolini, a baby boy named Francesco A. Lentini was born to Natale and Giovanna Falco. He was the fifth of 12 children and entered the world with something so unusual that the midwife, Maria Alberino, upon seeing him, was struck with terror. She wrapped the child in cloth, hid him in a basket under the bed, and ran from the room screaming. Why such horror? Francesco was born with a rare congenital condition. He had 3 legs, 4 feet, and 2 sets of male genitalia. The additional limbs and organs were the result of a parasitic twin that had failed to fully develop. In the tightly knit, deeply superstitious village, the reaction was swift and cruel. Whispers of divine punishment rippled through the streets. Locals began calling him U Maravigusu the Marvel, or more unkindly, the Little Monster. His parents, overwhelmed and ashamed, initially refused to raise him, leaving him in the care of an aunt. For a time, his life hung in the balance not medically, but socially. Yet, that would not be the end of Frank's story. In fact, it was just the beginning. At just 4 months old, Frank's family took him to Naples, where doctors confirmed that removing the additional limb was impossible. It was connected directly to his spine. The extra foot, protruding from the knee of his 3rd leg, served no functional purpose. His body defied explanation and solution. Despite his condition, Frank was intelligent, observant, and quick to adapt. His mother eventually warmed to him and began sewing custom trousers to accommodate his unusual frame. Special shoes were ordered 3 at a time from a local cobbler. He learned to sleep with his 3rd leg propped on a chest or tied to another limb. In many ways, he re-engineered how to live inside his own body. But a transformative moment came later in childhood, when he was placed in a home for disabled children. There, surrounded by kids who couldn't walk, couldn't see, or couldn't hear and yet still laughed, still played, and still lived, Frank experienced a profound shift. He realized, for the first time, that he wasn't broken. He was different, and different didn't have to mean less. This moment changed everything. Frank decided, consciously and completely, that he would never pity himself. Instead, he would find a way to live fully, freely, and maybe even famously. In 1898, Frank met Vincenzo Magnano, a showman with a traveling puppet theater who saw not deformity, but destiny. With his encouragement, the Lentini family packed their belongings and sailed to America in search of opportunity. Frank was 9 years old when he stepped onto American soil. He soon began performing at sideshows across the country, dazzling audiences not just with his anatomy, but with his charm. He was funny, sharp, and deeply aware of the spectacle surrounding him. He leaned into it, making his 3rd leg part of the act. He kicked footballs into the crowd. He jumped rope. He even ice skated. In 1906, he debuted with Barnum Bailey Circus at Madison Square Garden, a pinnacle for any performer. They called him the Great Lentini, the 3-legged Sicilian, and the human tripod. His show wasn't just about the bizarre, it was about defying limits. And that's what audiences loved. Frank was much more than a medical anomaly. He was a full-fledged entertainer with wit to spare. One of his most famous jokes was, "I'm the only man who doesn't need a chair to sit down," at which point, he'd fold down his 3rd leg like a built-in stool. But his charisma wasn't limited to the stage. Offstage, Frank became an unlikely advocate for wellness and decency. He published a pamphlet where he told his life story, but also offered advice, real advice on marriage, health, and morality. He condemned infidelity, encouraged proper nutrition for pregnant women, and even weighed in on men's health. Frank wasn't a doctor, but he understood the human body and the human heart in equal measure. His uniqueness, he believed, gave him a platform, and he chose to use it for good. In 1907, at the age of 18, Frank married Teresa Murray, a stage performer from Massachusetts. The couple had 4 children: Josephine, Ned, Francis Jr., and James. Despite his busy schedule and travel, Frank remained closely involved in family life. But fame and family don't always mix. In the 1930s, Frank and Teresa quietly separated. He began a new chapter with a woman named Helen Shoup, who remained his partner until his death. He later settled in Gibsonton, Florida, a haven for retired circus performers. There, Frank lived among fire-eaters, sword swallowers, and contortionists, and became something of a local legend. He even helped name a local eatery Giant's Fish camp run by a couple where the husband was 7 feet 4 inches and the wife just under 3 feet tall. Frank Lentini performed until the end. Literally. In 1966, while still touring in Jackson, Tennessee, he fell ill and passed away at the age of 77. He had lived his entire life on the road, on the stage, and on his own terms. He never considered himself disabled. In fact, when asked if he wished he'd been born normal, Frank answered, "In this life, you can either be pitiful or powerful. I chose the latter." His legacy didn't die with him. In 1995, the rock band Alice in Chains released a self-titled album sometimes referred to as the Tripod album, featuring a 3-legged dog on the cover and a photo of Frank Lentini on the back. More recently, he was portrayed by Jonathan Red-Avid in the film The Greatest Showman, ensuring that new generations would encounter the legend of the 3-legged man. Today, it's easy to dismiss sideshows as exploitative, but in the early 20th century, they offered something rare: economic opportunity and even stardom for people who might otherwise have lived in the shadows. Frank Lentini didn't just survive in that world, he thrived. He wasn't ashamed. He wasn't bitter. He was proud. He used what made him different not just to entertain, but to connect, to inspire laughter, wonder, and reflection. Thousands came to see the 3-legged man, but they left remembering someone far more complex: a father, a philosopher, a pioneer, and a man who lived with his whole body and his whole heart.